What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and in this video I want to discuss all of the gun balancing changes of Operation Shifting Tides, plus I also want to cover a couple of quick rumours about secret buffs that may have occurred. You know the deal, the pinned comment below lets you jump to any topic you like, and with that, let's jump straight in. Number 1 on the list of gun changes is that the BOSG-12.2, also known as the big ol' splatter gun in the Special Operations community I believe, actually received its ACOG. I contributed to the discussion around this topic a little while ago with an in-depth analysis looking into whether or not attaching an ACOG to the BOSG would do any harm. You can watch the full video via the card in the top right hand corner if you haven't seen it yet, or you can wait until the end card where there will also be a link. Next up, let's examine the buff to Caveira, specifically her M12 SMG. The patch notes tell us that it is currently one of the lowest damage and slowest firing SMGs in the game. With most players favouring the Louison, there is currently very little reason to select the M12, and we're looking to give the players more of a reason to pick up her M12. And most of that is true, I think, apart from the point about it being a low damage weapon. 36 points of damage, which is the pre-patch value at close range, was actually quite high for the SMG class, a full 6 points above average, but once you combine that with the appallingly low fire rate, you then get one of the lowest damage outputs per second, and I think that's maybe what the patch notes were trying to express here. The damage of the gun has now been raised to 40 points at ranges up to 18 meters, and from 28 to 31 points from 28 meters and onwards, with a linear drop-off in between, and I think before launching into an analysis of this, it's worth pointing out that this still makes the gun solidly below average in terms of its overall performance. Out of all of the full auto weapons in the game, 550 RPM is the slowest, and well below the mean average of 808.6 RPM. The only other comparable weapon in terms of the fire rate is Frost's 9mm C1 at 575 RPM, and it gets to do a very respectable 45 damage up close, 12.5% more than the freshly buffed M12. Fair enough, the damage output per second for the M12 is no longer the lowest out of all of the SMGs. It's now only the third lowest. Hooray! The new honours of lowest DPS go to the P90, with the MPX and MP5 in shared second place. But let's see how much difference the M12 buff will actually make in practice when you come up against full health opponents. At short range, the increased damage will mean that you need one less shot to down or kill against level 2 armor with body or limb strikes, and one less shot against level 3 armor with limb strikes only. Given the slow fire rate of the weapon, this results in a saving of a whopping 109 milliseconds for these specific cases, and while that may be great and all, we have to remember that this is because the stats were outrageously bad beforehand, and now they're just bad. At long range, the gun also sees some improvements in practical performance, but this time it's only the pure limb shots that will result in one less bullet being needed to deal with the level 2 and 3 armored enemies. As before, this once again results in a time saving of 109 milliseconds in each instance, and hey, at long range the M12 is actually around about average compared to the rest of the SMGs. Don't be fooled though, at these ranges it's headshots that win gunfights, so the 327 to 655 milliseconds TTK is not really going to do you much good there, and neither will the 550 RPM fire rate. So the bottom line here is that yes, the gun has been improved, but no, it's still not good by any comparison to the rest of the arsenal in the game. Now, given how powerful Caveira's special ability can be, I think that there is a strong case for leaving her with somewhat underpowered main weapons, especially at close ranges where the unique downing ability of her sidearm can be a really important factor in her being able to get an interrogation, and you would really want to make the Louison stand out as the best possible choice. I also understand that giving Cav a good main weapon could lead to her becoming quite frustrating to play against, even more than she can already be, and so I appreciate that there are strong arguments to keep the M12 somewhat underpowered. So if you enjoy playing Caveira, and if you've been looking forward to this buff, keep in mind that the advantages you will gain will be quite subtle in most cases. What are your thoughts on where Caveira is right now? Do you think that this buff brings her to a power level that is just about right, too strong, or do you think that she still needs more buffing to become truly competitive? Use the poll on screen to share your thoughts. Since the launch of Shifting Tides, I have had reports of a change to the fire rate of Buck's C8 SFW. The rumours are that the sound of the gun has changed and now appears faster than it used to be. Some other vague rumours around Mozzie's guns having been buffed have also been thrown my way, so we went ahead and retested the fire rate of the 3 guns in question, and I can confirm that there have been no changes this season. The C8, P10 Roni and Commando 9 all retain the exact same fire rates as before when going by the ammo counter down in the bottom right hand corner of the HUD. The other weapons balancing change for Shifting Tides is a set of changes to some semi-auto shotguns that have become a bit of a menace, especially on the console versions of Siege. Let's take a closer look at Ela's FO-12 shotgun first. This gun has been changed in 2 ways. First off is a tweak to the damage drop-off curve, and then there is also a change to the recoil and spread while firing, or at least that's what the patch notes tell us. The patch notes claim that damage remains the same up until 6 meters, but decays more rapidly to make it less effective from more than 10 meters. This is a good start to help us understand what has changed, but it is far too vague to be able to draw any firm conclusions from, so of course I went away and did some in-game testing. If you saw my shotgun evaluation video way back in the day, then you may remember that damage over distance can be quite a complex thing for many shotguns. We know from the operator selection menu that the FO-12 does 35 points of damage up close, and of course that is for each of the 8 pellets the gun fires, resulting in a total damage of 280 hit points. Now as you get further away, not only will fewer and fewer pellets hit, but you also have the rather complex damage drop-off curve kick in, which before the nerf looked like this. Linear drop-off between 6 and 12 meters, then a plateau on 24 points up until it drops off steeply again between 18 and 21 meters for a final damage per pellet of 12 points. Fast forward to Shifting Tides, and this has been simplified quite a bit. Instead of the more complicated curve of before, we now have a pretty linear drop-off between 6 and around 20 meters, so the maximum close-range damage and minimum long-range damage stats stay exactly the same, and so do the distances at which these stats apply, but everything in between has been weakened a bit. The question now is, how much will this affect the gun's effectiveness in practice? The average damage reduction in that zone between 6 and 21 meters is 4 damage points per pellet, going all the way up to a maximum delta of 10 points at 18 meters distance. And this is per pellet, resulting in an average loss of 32 hit points of damage per shot, with a maximum reduction of 80 points. Sounds like a lot, right? So is this a really massive nerf that will have a huge impact on the gameplay with this gun? As you can probably tell, those were rhetorical questions because, like I mentioned a little while ago, we also have to consider how many pellets will hit their target on average at each distance. I ran a few more tests to be able to estimate how many pellets are likely to hit an opponent if you're aiming down sights at center mass of target, and the fact is that once you get to 7 meters, you will pretty much only be hitting half of your pellets on average. This drops away even more, and once you get to 14 or 15 meters, you will pretty much be hitting only 1 pellet for each shot. If we combine this data with the total damage per shot drop-off curves from before, we can create essentially an adjusted total damage value for every distance. And if we now compare the 2 total damage curves, then all of a sudden the delta between the 2 is not all that great, because once we get to the distances at which the damage per pellet stats really start to diverge in the pre- and post-patch versions of the FO-12, the number of pellet strikes will be so small that the total difference between the 2 versions of the gun becomes minimal in reality. The bottom line is that in my eyes, the damage change that looks quite extreme at first will almost certainly be relatively subtle in practice. The distances at which the damage change actually occurs are the distances at which the gun was already ineffective before the patch anyway, so you will almost certainly not really be able to feel the difference in-game. But the damage nerf is only one part of the change that has come to the FO-12. The second aspect of the nerf is increasing the spread when shooting quickly to bring the gun more in line with other semi-auto shotguns. And here again the change is quite obvious. Before the patch, the spread of the pellets would stay exactly the same from shot to shot, meaning that you could spam out a withering hail of lead, and apart from the recoil, you didn't really need to worry about the gun's effectiveness. While this actually made sense from a real-world real-world perspective, shotguns don't magically end up with massively larger shot dispersion just because you fire shots in quick succession, it was inconsistent in terms of the shotgun gameplay behavior in Rainbow Six Siege because almost all of the other semi-auto shotguns in Siege already had this anti-spam feature built in. Like we've seen with other changes earlier on in the video, this one looks quite severe at first glance because the max spread does bloom up significantly after each shot, but we have to keep in mind that the fire rate is not unlimited, and in fact, when we look at the point at which the next shot actually goes off, then we can see that the spread has already shrunk back down significantly. So the difference between the first shot spread and the second shot spread, as measured by the hipfire indicator, is actually only 15 to 20% larger than before, depending on exactly which frame the shot goes off. Nevertheless, a 20% greater spread in terms of the diameter for chain shots is not to be sniffed at, and will definitely shorten the effective range of the gun just a little more. The final bullet point in the patch notes mentions slightly increased recoil and kick to make the gun less easy to control and less spray and pray. What does it mean that both the recoil and kick have been increased? Your guess is probably as good as mine. I initially thought that maybe kick refers to the visual screen shake after every shot, but when comparing pre- and post-patch footage, I couldn't really tell any difference. But then again, when comparing the two sets of footage, I also couldn't really tell the difference between the before and after recoil. Because the problem here is that recoil is of course made up of a fixed vertical component and a randomized recoil diamond, and so the recoil after each shot is never the same anyway. Is it possible that the recoil values have been increased so subtly that it is practically unnoticeable from shot to shot? Sure, and my guess is that that is exactly what we have here. The recoil may well be a bit stronger now, but even with side-by-side footage comparisons, it is impossible to really quantify. Something that we can quantify though is the reset time after firing a shot. So that's basically how long it takes for your crosshairs to come back down to where they were when you fired the shot. This time has been increased from 500 to 600 milliseconds, so again a 20% increase. And that's it for the FO-12, I hope. Individually, these three nerfs might not have had that much of an effect. The damage change is not as drastic in practice as it might have seemed at first glance, and the same goes for the spread increase, and then the recoil increase is so subtle that you can't even really notice it. But when you add all three of these changes together, then I would say that the FO-12 is now quite a bit more challenging to use, and its effective range will now be reduced to very short engagements. I personally don't play the game on console, so it's impossible for me to judge from personal experience how much of a problem the gun was, but just looking at how this triple nerf comes together to bump down the effectiveness and usability of this gun overall, I can only assume that the power issue on console is now addressed. The very last weapon change of Operation Shifting Tides is very similar to the nerf that the FO-12 got but applied to the Russian SASG-12. The super awesome Shotgun 12 now also has the follow-up shot spread increase that effectively increases the max dispersion diameter by 20%, and there are also the additional recoil, kick and reset time, although as before the recoil and kick are very hard to notice. All three operators who have access to the sausage, so that's Finka, Kapkan and Tachanka, also have great alternative primaries which will definitely be preferable on PC anyway, at least if you're going for max competitiveness, and so again, this change seems mostly aimed at helping out console players and at bringing the gun into line with all of the other semi-auto shotguns. And that is it. Wow, this went on for much longer than I was anticipating, but thank you so much to all of you who stuck with me to the end. I do hope that you will find all of this info useful. If so, do feel free to leave the video a like, and with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.